Good evening to you. The EU weighing up more sanctions against Russia over Ukraine. Welcome to the France 24 debate. In Brussels, a special summit's been examining a sixth round of sanctions against Russia since the invasion of Ukraine began back on February the 24th. So is this the moment an oil embargo comes into play? The Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky told the EU Council that his country needs its backing more than ever. He speaking to the course in a special video address from Kyiv. Meanwhile, the French Foreign Minister is in Ukraine, the most senior French government figure to make the trip so far. Catherine Colonna beginning her visit in Bucha, the satellite town near Kyiv, scene of alleged war crimes by Russian soldiers back in March. One burning question then in Kyiv: where are these heavy weapons that the Allies promised Ukraine? The absence of this weaponry, a key reason, many say, as to why Russia is now advancing, slowly but nonetheless advancing, in the Donbass. The gains around the city of Severodonetsk, where a French journalist has lost his life this Monday, evidence of this. Well, our panel to discuss the developments are, in no order of preference, Denis Katayev, Russian journalist. Denis, thanks for being with us, sir. Great to see you. Thomas Pellerin-Karlin is director of the Jacques Delors Energy Center. Thomas, great to see you. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
Anastasia Shaposhkina is president of Eastern Circles, which is a think tank, and lecturer at Sciences Po. Anastasia, great to see you. Thank you very much indeed. And we're joined from Ukraine by Inna Sovsun, member of the Ukraine Parliament for the Golos Party. Inna, thank you for being with us. And Inna, no surprise, I'd like to start with you. We've had, obviously, the address by Zelensky to the EU today. You're speaking to us from Ukraine where things are happening by the minute. Give us your sense about how things are going and what Ukraine needs from the EU.
Well, things are going very difficultly on the east of Ukraine, in Donbass. As you reported correctly, the situation over there is very complicated. Unfortunately, Ukrainian army is not able to control the territory over there, and slowly Russian army is progressing into Ukrainian territory. And it is unfortunate, of course, because we are losing ground, and it's also unfortunate twice because it could have been avoided if we have got the weapons that we were asking for a month ago, and then we would be able to at least match Russian artillery, Russian heavy weapons that they have all concentrated on the east of Ukraine right now. So I think that there is this general feeling of, following the news from the east very closely right now. And of course, we are all very scared of what is happening there for the lives of the people, for the lives of the military men and women over there. But then, of course, we are trying to think of the best ways of how yet to persuade our Western allies to provide us with the weapons that would be able to save the lives of our men and women over there.
Indeed. This is something I think I've heard you say before. And for you, this must be incredibly frustrating. Well, beyond frustrating, it must be infuriating to still be asking for the same things.
Yeah, unfortunately so, and particularly for me and for our party, because we have been always probably the most pro-Western, pro-European political party in the parliament, and we truly believed that Ukraine belongs to Europe, and we also believe that Europe understands that that is where Ukraine belongs, and we have been making these calls for providing help to the Ukrainian army for 3 months now, and unfortunately not all of those calls have been responded from our allies on the West, and unfortunately, right now we haven't got all the weapons we have been asked. We have been asking. I don't mean to sound ungrateful, of course. We are getting some of the weapons, including those from France. It's just the pace of the delivery is too slow, but also the issue of the type of weapon that we are getting is also very important, because what we have received a lot so far, for instance, are the anti-tank missiles, which does allow us to destroy lots of Russian tanks. And I think we destroyed about 40% of the tanks that Russians brought into Ukrainian territory. But in terms of Russian artillery, we do not really have the weapons to match that, and we cannot destroy their artillery. So they continue shelling our cities, my native city of Kharkiv, the cities in Donbass. Of course, we all have seen what they have done to Mariupol, and we cannot really destroy it. We cannot destroy it with anti-tank missiles. We cannot destroy it with simple bravery of our men and women in the military, and we cannot destroy it with rifles. So what we truly need are the heavy weapons. And unfortunately, there is still a debate on the West on whether Ukraine should be provided with heavy weapons. But it needs to be understood that we can only fight against Russian heavy weapons with the heavy weapons that is in the Ukrainian army. We cannot fight back with simple bravery and rifles. It needs to be matched with heavy weapons. We don't mean to use it to attack Russia, but in our case, it's a defensive war, but we do need an offensive weapons to fight back against Russian army over here. And that seems to be clear, and it needs to be understood as clear as a day, but unfortunately there are still debates about that on the West.
Inna, before I bring in the rest of the guests, can I ask you where you stand on the issue of an oil embargo?
Well, we did hope that the decision on the oil embargo would be taken now, these days, on this summit of the European Union. But unfortunately, it appears now that the embargo will not be introduced, at least fully. And unfortunately, that will not be good on two reasons. First of all, it means that the European Union will still be providing money to Putin to buy and or to create the weapons with which they will be killing Ukrainians. Secondly, because for Putin, that will mean that he's actually winning. He is making Europe seem weak, not united, and not able to respond to the threat that he is presenting to European Union itself. So I think that's unfortunate if after all, the European Union would not be able to introduce a full-scale embargo. That will make Europe seem weak, and that is something that Putin really, really wants.
Inna, thank you very much for giving us those opening remarks. I'll be coming back to you throughout the debate, of course, and you may find yourself actually repeating yourself. But as I said to a colleague earlier on, if the story's good, it's worth telling more than once. Inna, you have a compelling story to tell, and we appreciate you taking part in this programme. Let's bring in some of our guests now for some comment. Denis Kataev, Russian journalist. I'm not saying you're answering for Russia, because that's not the case. But where do you see this going? Because clearly Ukraine want the EU to act on this issue of an oil embargo first and foremost. But of course, there are many countries in the EU who think, hang on, we can't afford to do that.
First of all, I'd like to express my condolences to a French journalist who was killed today in Ukraine because he's another victim of Putin's regime. So this is a key moment, and this is a moment of truth for Europe, for common Europe now in Brussels, so to move on. Yes, I agree with my colleague from Ukraine that Europe now should to be united, and I think that your ambassadors have reached a deal on this issue to ban Russian oil. It's very important today during the war. It's so important. But we have a Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban, yes. He said he will agree to 6 package of sanctions against Russia if solutions are found to energy security. So what is it? What is the question? What we'll do with Orban? What Europe will do with Orban? And I think that Europe has to find solutions to solution on this issue. And on the topic of sanctions, I agree with Lithuanian president who said that shame we are not able to implement the 6 package of sanctions for Russia in full package. Yes, I hope very much today we will close the last open page and we will succeed to have the result, and then we will start to consider the 7th package of sanctions. I think that Europe must be united today, and only sanction on oil will be able to move the situation, I think, inside Russia as well.
Indeed. Thank you very much indeed. Anastasia, can I bring you in, President of Eastern Circles, lecturer at Sciences Po. What do you consider to be the major sticking point regarding these sanctions? I mean, clearly we've spoken about Viktor Orban and his sense that, you know, this isn't going to work for Hungary if this ban on Russian oil is imposed. But of course, it's not just him, is it? There are other countries too.
Indeed, the ironic part about the fact that it's Hungary which is blocking the unanimous decision of the Council is that Hungary is what we can call the least European country today among the 27 member states, and we can even throw Ukraine into the lot because, of course, it's the country which adheres the least to the European values proclaimed by all of the European treaties that it signed, including the democratic values. But also, on your point, indeed, Russia supplied before the war 27% of oil imports to Europe and 14% of gas imports. And the country which is much more important and powerful in these terms, of course, is Germany, which is very much dependent on the supplies of Russian gas, and which is, along with about 20 other countries of the European Union, has opened new accounts in Gazprom Bank in this last month in order to therefore pay with rubles, just like Vladimir Putin insisted and demanded for the Russian gas and Russian oil. And that, of course, is and since then, of course, also what happened, what is important, is that we do not really even know how much the Russian Urals today is bought at, because since the deals are now private, they shifted into the private mode between states and among states and among companies with Russia. Therefore, this information is no longer available. We knew that there was a discount of about $35 per barrel at the Russian Urals about a month ago, but now for about a month, and then my fellow speakers are going to develop this more. We don't even know at how much the discount is.
So,
but what we do know is that
about $190 right now, isn't it? I think something like that. So just to give people a bit of a
perspective.
Yeah,
but just to say that the important thing for us to take out is that it means that the majority of the member states have agreed to play by the Russian rules about this new energy trade with Russia and the conditions of war. So while with one hand, the European member states can supply weapons to Ukraine of whatever caliber they choose. With the other hand, they're paying Russia for fighting Ukraine, and supplied with their own weapons. And so that is, of course, very ironic and doesn't at all comply with the logic of choosing one or the other. Then, of course, there is the whole issue of how to replace Russia, how to replace Russian gas, how to replace Russian oil. So far on the oil front, it's Saudi Arabia and the US which have been responsible for the supply kind of rights, together with Kuwait and Iraq and other countries in the Middle East. But for gas, it's much more difficult to replace because, of course, there is the infrastructure which you'll need in order to get there. And whether we talk about Germany, which doesn't even have LNG terminals to begin with, and where each LNG terminal will take anywhere between 2 to 4 years to build, even if they go at an accelerated pace that they want to go on. Whether you talk about Italy, or Hungary or other countries which completely have been dependent.
How about that big LNG terminal being built at Antwerp, Zeebrugge, Bruges in Belgium? I understand there's a big liquefied natural gas terminal being built there. Is that going to help?
That could have helped, but again, Germany, we're talking about a big supply that was going to be necessary. Today, we have to understand that only a fifth of all the European gas imports comes from LNG in general. Only about a fifth. And and most of it comes actually through the Iberian Peninsula, so Spain specifically. That's where most of the regasification infrastructure is located, the LNG terminals. That is connected with a pipeline with the rest of the EU, and that pipeline transit capacity is about 5 billion cubic meters per year. So that's rather low compared to 200 billion cubic meters per year that Gazprom sold last year to Europe, and that needed to be replaced, in theory. So we are talking about a huge augmentation of that capacity, not only vis-à-vis the total capacity that is already there in the European Union, but also vis-à-vis the possible transit capacity, which would need to be increased. And one terminal, especially not in Germany, is not going to solve Germany's problem.
Indeed, I can sense the growing frustration in Kiev listening to these explanations. And Inna, I know, knows this story, but clearly, is trying to get people to take notice, sit up and demand from their representatives all around Europe that things be done. Just to give you a little bit of an update, Russia's Gazprom is halting gas supplies to the Dutch trader Gas terror this at the end of May, which is coming up, I think, tomorrow, because it hasn't paid in the ruble for gas payment scheme. So not everybody playing along with what Vladimir Putin wants. Let's bring in Thomas Pellerin-Carlin from the Jacques Delors Energy Centre. Thomas, great to see you. You've heard what everybody's got to say. I mean, I'm getting a sense that we're nowhere nearer this possibility of an embargo of Russian oil. And would you say that's the case?
So I tend to be mostly pessimistic usually on TV interviews, but I happen to be more optimistic than what I've heard so far. So the political question is, do Europe chooses to continue to finance Putin's regime and Putin's war on Ukraine? The official answer is we are going to phase that out. We're going to stop funding that. There have been already important sanctions, especially on the Russian central bank, that have already been effective. Then Europe is trying to really, let's say, tackle the backbone of the Russian economy, of Putin's economy, which is export of fossil fuels. We already have an embargo on coal, which is not a major source of income. I mean, it has been already 1 billion euros since the war began, so it's still significant. You can buy a couple of missiles with 1 billion euros. That's already something that is decided, that is entering into force, and that will be fully into force on August the 10th. Now we've got a discussion on oil. Oil is still today the most important source of revenue for Putin. Putin makes more money selling oil to the EU than it makes gas. It's about the same amount, but it's a bit more when it comes to oil. On oil, we now have an agreement. There is a consensus, with the exception of Viktor Orban. So it's not that Europe is split. It's 26 versus 1. And I would add the European Parliament on top of that and the European Commission on top of that. And here we have an internal problem because our member states have chosen to decide everything unanimously when it comes to economic sanctions. And here we are. But that's a problem that is not new. It's something that my Polish friend have told me about. In the 17th century, they introduced the liberum veto, which was one of the causes of the collapse of Polish independence in the 17th century and early 18th century. We are in that situation too with Viktor Orban. There are ways around that. We can increase the pressure, the political pressure on Viktor Orban. That's already something that has been tried to some extent. We also have legal ways to suspend the voting rights of a country when that country violates the rule of law, which is clearly the case in Hungary. A couple of years ago, the European Commission decided to activate that article of the treaty that could lead to such sanction. The Polish government of the time, which is the same today, the one that is de facto led by Kaczynski, chose to side with Orban. And here we must be clear when it comes to the Polish priorities. Is Poland on the side of Ukraine and European unity, or is it on the side of Viktor Orban? And we need to have a clearer Polish voice on that. So that's the issue for oil. I'm quite confident we will get there eventually. It will be slow and we will do things too little, too late, as we always do in the European Union. But in the end, after having exhausted all other possible options, we tend to opt for the right thing. But obviously, being too late is quite critical given what is happening in Ukraine. So time is of the essence. Then there's the issue of natural gas, which is far more difficult for us Europeans because of the infrastructure. Precisely. And so far, we have not had any, European leader that essentially, spoke the truth, which is to say that an embargo, or rather a full disruption of Russian gas supply to the EU is inevitable. The question is, do we let Putin decide when to do that and who to target first? And he already did that. He did something that the Soviet Union never did, which is to cut gas supply to a member state of the European Union. It did that with Bulgaria already late April, also to Poland already late April, to Finland at the beginning of May, and now apparently maybe even to the Netherlands. So the question is, how do we organize internally? How do we make sure that we create the kind of general mobilization we need in Europe to save as many gas molecules as possible through what we call energy sufficiency, so changes in behaviors? And that's something that must be done by the wealthy first. Just a couple of days ago, I was walking by the streets of Paris in front of a Tesla shop. And there was a lot of lights on that Tesla shop at, 11 p.m., which, by the way, is illegal in France. But still, that law is not being applied. This electricity is being produced through gas. So currently in France and everywhere in Europe, we are using gas to generate electricity that we waste for stuff that are unimportant. So we need that kind of general mobilization. If we want to look at one country that did that about 10 years ago, it's Japan. After Fukushima, Japan had a massive shortage of electricity supply, and they chose to introduce a national campaign, a national mobilization to save energy called Setsuden in Japanese. They led by example. The government changed even the outfits, just not wearing a tie in order to have less cooling in a building. They managed to cut electricity consumption by 15%, 1.5. That's a major contribution, and that's the kind of stuff we need to do now in order to save as much gas as possible, so we can later on introduce that embargo on Russian gas as soon as possible.
Thomas, thank you very much indeed. We mentioned Viktor Orban. Let's take a look now at our report about, to give you some more context about who Orban is, what Hungary's position is on energy.
Banning Russian oil imports would amount to a, quote, atomic bomb for Hungary's economy. That's how Prime Minister Viktor Orban described Budapest's position on EU sanction proposals. Hungary gets 85% of its natural gas and more than 60% of its oil from Russia. The Prime Minister says his country would need 5 years and vast investment in its refineries and pipelines to be able to transform its current system. The Hungarian government estimates it would cost between 15 and 18 billion euros for the infrastructure overhaul needed.
We can only support this shift if it does not cause impossible costs for Hungary and Hungarian families. Today it would. Therefore, we need funds for the shift and an interim period. This is the condition of our support.
Hungary is also refusing to support the blacklisting of the head of the Kremlin-allied Russian Orthodox Church, citing an issue of religious freedom. And when it comes to weapons, Hungary's position is not to send them to Ukraine, as these shipments could become targets of Russian attacks at Ukraine's western border, where ethnic Hungarians live.
Volodymyr Zelensky calling for internal quarrels within the EU to be put to one side so things can be sorted out. I think, Thomas, you wanted to come back about the atomic bomb issue, the kind of inverted commas. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, so there are indeed legitimate concerns coming from Hungary when it comes to their supply in oil and gas. They happen to be the same concerns that Slovakia has. And the European Commission in its proposal addressed those concerns by giving them more time to phase out Russian oil and by giving them also money. That's part of the Repower EU plan, 300 billion euros, including some money targeted specifically for Slovakia.
300 billion euros being given by whom to whom?
By the European Union through Next Generation EU and the EU budget to finance concrete projects that help to phase out Russian oil and gas supplies, including some of that money being targeted for Slovakia and Hungary. And I'm comparing the two because the two have the same energy problem, but Hungary's answer is we're going to veto, and Slovakia's answer is it's going to be hard. We want your help, but we are ready to take one for the team.
European response and Hungarian response. Yes?
Yeah, it's not only Orban the problem for Europe now. While European leaders now in Brussels decided how to impact oil embargo on Russian oil, Greek tankers help Moscow to set up incomes from oil. So in reality, the reality is that oil exports do not fall. Sure. This is a challenge for European leaders now.
Okay, let's bring Inna back in. Inna, we were talking about Viktor Orban. We saw the report there. I hope you could hear it. Is one of the issues, or perhaps the issue, that Viktor Orban is really basically a great friend and political ally of Vladimir Putin. You know, when Orban was re-elected, the first person to ring him and say, thanks, well done, mate, was Vladimir Putin.
Yes, indeed. But before I refer to the question about Orban, there is something I wanted to add regarding the energy issues that Europe is facing, because we all understand that Ukraine is now seen as a source of the problem for the European Union, if I may put it this way. But what is important to understand is that Ukraine can be part of the solution as well, because Ukraine did join the European energy sector, and we did join the electrical grid. And we actually have right now the oversupply and overproduction of electricity, because we do have quite powerful nuclear power plant stations that can produce more electricity, which now, as we have connected to the European grid, can be sent to the European Union and to the states that need it. Of course, that is not 100%, can be supplemented to the gas and electricity, but that is something that needs to be looked into. And I know that is something that Ukrainian side is now talking about to the European Union, is we can be part of the solution as well. We can provide electricity that you might need and provide energy which you might need because you will lose some of the Russian gas. So that is an important add to the energy mix overall, and I think that is something that needs to be remembered. Ukraine can be part of the solution, not just necessarily the source of the confusion about the further policy debates about energy. But then about Viktor Orban, of course, he's very problematic, I believe, for the European Union, but then also for Ukraine. I'll tell you this, Ukraine was having troubles with his government for a couple of years right now, with the Hungarian government being extremely tough on Ukraine. They were arguing that there were discussions about the Hungarian minority over here in Ukraine. They were basically trying to force Ukrainian government into ensuring that the kids from the Hungarian minority do not basically need to study Ukrainian language in school, because they can only study in Hungarian if they want to. And that was a very big debate over here in Ukraine with Hungary, with them putting pressure on the Ukrainian government in terms of them studies of this of schooling of the Hungarian language speaking kids. But then just today I read that one of the politicians from Orban's party basically saying that Ukraine didn't exist as a state and it's a fake entity, and that is very problematic. The very idea that a representative of the government of the European Union, one of the member states, is saying that Ukraine doesn't exist as a state. That is basically just the repetition of what Putin is saying that Ukraine did not exist, that was created by Lenin or whatever else he was making up. So this is clearly the narratives that Putin is promoting, and I think it is extremely dangerous that they are being promoted by the government of the member state of the European Union. And I would agree with a colleague who previously said that the European Union truly needs to react on that, because it's not just about Ukraine issue. It's overall direction of where Hungary is being led by Orban, and I don't think that this is the direction of respect for democracy, for human rights, for human dignity. So that is actually problematic, not just from the Ukrainian perspective or the perspective of the war against Ukraine, but overall for the European Union and how the EU would react if a member state is definitely developing in a different direction and promoting different values that European Union is standing for.
Indeed, and I think you've hit the nail right on the head. I think there are, obviously the issue that Hungary has and Poland to a lesser extent, I think, certainly in terms of how it's handling Ukraine refugees, for instance. I think Poland's door's been wide open. But before that, before the actual conflict began, before the invasion began, let's get the terminology correct, before the invasion began, the EU was taking action against Poland regarding rule of law and lack of respect of those kind of issues, which was deemed to be un-European. Anastasia, you wanted to add something. Go ahead.
I wanted to add something on the energy aspect as well, that of course, we are focusing all on natural gas, and there we've covered kind of this part of the hypocrisy, so to say, right? Well, on the one hand, we read the REPowerEU strategy, and we hear a lot about the need to phase out of Russian gas. On the other hand, part of the REPowerEU strategy is to fill up the European gas stock. And how do we fill out those storage tanks? Well, we fill them up before October with Russian gas now. And that's kind of the irony number one. Then irony number two is, as Viktor Orban is kind of quote unquote blocking the way for the 27 member states to advance on the oil embargo, he also is playing into the hand of the same 27 member states who actually are going to all collectively suffer from the oil embargo. And the third aspect of the energy irony, which is not even covered at all, is nuclear energy. Not only can it serve, for example, for example, electricity exports from Ukraine, but also it happens to be a very strong link with Russia in terms of business ties. For some, like for example Slovakia, an excellent team player when it comes to gas embargo, Slovakia has imported Russian nuclear fuel after the beginning of the war by plane to refuel its own nuclear power plants. And it's not the only country which is importing Russian nuclear fuel. There are 4 members of the European Union who are relying on it for their nuclear power plants to function. There are also more members of the European Union which are relying on the Russian conversion and enrichment services for their nuclear power plants and for their nuclear fuel. And this is the topic which is not been ever raised when it comes to energy sanctions.
Anastasia, thank you. Thomas, I know you want to speak. Go ahead.
Yeah, so indeed, one of the key priorities for the European Union is to prepare for the next winter. For that, we need to have our gas storage being full. The Russian gas supply to the EU have decreased, and that was actually Gazprom's decision from August 2021. So as of today, the main way we import gas from outside the EU is through liquefied natural gas. That's around 3 billion cubic meter a day. Then second is Norway. Russia only comes third, which is a massive change because 1 year ago Russia was number one. It's down to number 3 already. When it comes to uranium, that's an interesting element because we need to be mindful of what's the rationale behind economic sanctions. The aim of those economic sanctions is to impose a massive economic pain on Vladimir Putin so he changes his policy. And at the same time, those economic sanctions take time. They take months and years in order to have a massive impact. So we need to build the political sustainability of those sanctions in the EU. That's going to be hard for gas. But when it comes to nuclear, clearly it makes no sense for the European Union to sanction Russian nuclear at this stage because it's a very, very limited flow of money for Putin. So the impact on Putin would be very limited. I mean, we're talking millions, not billions of euros here, while at the same time that would have a massive impact on Central Eastern European countries, first and foremost, that are already the ones that are the most hit. And if they can't produce electricity using nuclear, they will rely on gas. And so there we definitely have a problem. So we need to be mindful of that element. An embargo on Russian oil is the number one priority. We need to do that as soon as possible. We need to prepare for the embargo on Russian gas, but for uranium, to me, that's really the least of our priorities now.
Ukraine state gas transit operator says Gazprom has booked transit capacity of 42.12 million cubic meters for May 31st. What do you read into that? Anything? Nothing.
Can you say that again?
42.12 million cubic meters of capacity has been booked by Gazprom.
Yep.
This is according to Ukraine state gas transit operator, because the gas presumably is coming across Ukraine.
Yeah, so today most of the Russian gas going to Europe goes through Nord Stream 1. Which is a pipeline that directly connects Russia to Germany. That pipeline has a capacity of 55 billion cubic meters. So having Gazprom booking around 40 BCM is, I mean, I don't have the figures in front of me, but it seems to be like a normal year, so to say, when it comes to gas.
Basically, it's business as usual, to coin a phrase.
Yeah, when you look at the when you look at gas supplies to Europe via Nord Stream or via Ukraine, if you just look at the figures, it's business as usual. If you take the business as usual, the situation where we were in September, which is a situation where already Gazprom decided to decrease its gas supply to the EU.
So as you're saying, I think it's a question of who's controlling what, and this isn't what Inna wants to hear, is it at all? I'm sorry, go ahead, Dennis, give us your thoughts.
Something I think that's really so important to Europeans to make decisions as soon as possible to impose an embargo on Russian oil. In geopolitical terms also, because this week the United States will announce to announce new package of military aid to Ukraine, and we know about Lend-Lease by Biden on the one hand. And on the other hand, Johnson's proposal to create a new alliance instead of European Union, new alliance with the Baltic region also, yeah? So he was already invited Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky to decide how it's possible to work, but I think it's because of distrust of Brussels decisions, because of frustration with Berlin's reaction to military aid also.
Okay, thank you for that. Let's go back to Inna to ask, well, basically, to pick up on that issue. Is there a sense, Inna, of frustration with how the EU is working? Vladimir Zelensky, of course, calling on internal quarrels to be put aside and for the right action to be taken. I'm wondering what your feeling about that is.
I'll just continue on what was said before, which is, of course, Ukraine has been offered this new union with the United Kingdom and then potentially some other countries. I'll tell you this. The position of the government, the position of the parliament, the position of the Ukrainian people as of right now is very united. We want to be part of the European Union. That has not changed. We appreciate the help we are getting from the United Kingdom. We appreciate how much effort Boris Johnson is making in terms of promoting support to Ukraine all over the world. But we want to be part of the European Union. That is something that is written in our constitution. That is something what people are basically dying for over here in Ukraine right now. So that is the path that we have chosen, and we truly believe and we really want the European Union to be reciprocal in that sense. We want the EU to respond in the same manner, and that is why I think the major issue for the European Union right now, well, of course, right now the urgent issue is with the embargo, but for the next EU summit, the major issue would be whether we would be granted the status of the candidate to the European Union, and that is something that seems to be rather dividing inside European Union right now, which of course is disappointing, because for us it seems like this, that we are defending the joint European home right now, but once we try to knock at the door, we are being getting the answers like, oh, you are not allowed in. And that is whether that is offending, yes, it is disappointing, let's put it mildly. Is we want to be part of the European Union. We understand our own problems. We understand that we have lots of work to do in order to achieve this goal after all. But granting us a candidate status is very important symbolically, but then also reform-wise. Once you get the candidate status, that means that there are some obligations, and then it will mean that we shall be pushing forward the reform agenda inside Ukraine as well. So that is the biggest question right now, whether this decision will be made by the European leaders or not.
Inna, thank you very much indeed. We can hear Ukraine knocking and the door not quite being opened yet. Thomas?
I think there's a general agreement among the members of the European Union that ideally someday Ukraine will be part of the European Union. The question
It has to be sooner rather than later, doesn't it, surely?
The thing is, I mean, entering the European Union is a very, very lengthy process for everybody. And Ukraine may be the country of all the countries that are already member, the country that has the largest way, or rather, let's say that has the longest path to do in terms of rule of law, in terms of democracy, anti-corruption, all those elements. What we see, and that's the case actually, by the way, with Viktor Orban, is that when you have a country that is entering too soon the European Union, and whilst we don't have yet a system that obliges that country to follow European values and European rules once it's a member, it can be a threat for the European Union. And that's what we've seen with Viktor Orban's Hungary. So to me, I mean, the message is clear. If Ukraine chooses to enter the European Union, then we will do everything we can for Ukraine to become a full member of the European Union eventually. One proposal that Emmanuel Macron, the French president, did was to create this European political community, which is kind of an immediate answer, which is a way to say to Ukraine, yes, you belong to the European family, as all other countries that are not members of the European Union, but because they chose not to be members of the European Union, countries like Norway, like Switzerland, that could join the EU, very quickly if they wanted to. And so that's the proposal that this serves as an immediate answer, and that is complementary to the far longer process of accession to becoming a full member of the European Union.
Let's put that straight back to Inna Sovsun. Inna, how do you feel hearing that? I mean, Thomas's explanation, I think, very clear, but I suspect perhaps not what you wanted to hear.
Well, first of all, trust me, I do understand that the path to accession is very long. And I do understand all the challenges that we have to deal with internally in order to become full-scale members. That is why there is no talk about membership for Ukraine right now. We are not even talking about that. But I think what we are talking about is granting us the candidate status. And that is more of a, symbolic gesture, not so much a legally obliging gesture. And I think on the symbolic level, it's very important to show that we understand that you are fighting for us right now. We are fighting for you right now. We are dying for you, because we are not allowing Russians to go into Poland. We are not allowing them to go into the Baltic states. So I think on the symbolic level, given this candidate status is extremely important for the Ukrainians over here, but then also for the European Union to show that this is part of our family, and Putin needs to understand that. But of course, I understand that membership is not a close perspective. Trust me, we all do understand that very, very deeply. Very deeply, we do understand that. So we just wish to get this symbolic gesture, and then we do our homework. And if we do it badly, well, of course, we will not get the membership. We are fully aware of that. But unfortunately, what we are being proposed is this European political community, which, truth be told, has been met with a very skeptical reaction over here in Kiev. To us, it reads like, second-rate Europeans, not fully part of the European family. And it is largely seen as an alternative to the membership in the European Union, not the path towards it. So truth be told, it's not very well accepted over here in Kiev. And we are still asking for this symbolic gesture of giving us the candidacy status and then giving us a full list of what needs to be done for Ukraine to get a full status of the member of the European Union, of course, when we are ready. Trust me, we do not want to repeat the history of Hungary and be the weak member of the European Union. We want to be a strong member of the European Union, but we want to be allowed in. And that is important right now. And again, symbolic gesture after all right now. And I hope the European Union would be strong enough to show this symbolic gesture.
Inna, thank you. That was loud and clear. I've got no time left, but I'm stealing some time. Anastasia, very quickly, what did you want to add?
I wanted to add that it's a purely political decision. And of course, it's very ironic to say that Ukraine has the longest path to go because of its corruption problems. After we have seen Gerhard Schröder being pretty much playing a puppet to Putin, after we have seen François Fillon, former candidate for presidency in France, who still is sitting on the board of Rosneft after everything that has been happening since February, it is absolutely ironic, to say the least, to talk about corruption in Ukraine when we see corruption on the highest level in the leading member states of the European Union, such as Germany and France. And there is no need to talk about Poland and Hungary or Bulgaria or Romania or any of the Balkan states which are being accepted at a very high rate. And just to complete that, it is a political decision. Clearly, it means nothing. It will mean nothing for Ukraine to attain right now this status. But it will mean especially for the European Union to show that it's ready to stand behind this decision militarily. And the reason it's not making the decision is because militarily it cannot support it.
Thank you. Quickly, go ahead. Thomas.
I mean, I think we're here for the long run, so we need to be rational. We can't accuse the German nation and the German government to be corrupt because a former member of that government is immoral. Those are two completely different things. The same goes when it comes to the oil embargo and the gas embargo. I mean, the worst case scenario is that we do that badly, and therefore it backfires, and we have a social movement against Ukraine inside the European Union. That would be the worst case scenario. I'm not saying that we should take our time. I think obviously we need to act fast, but we need to be rational about that and to go to ensure that we build public support. We have now public support for the oil embargo. We need Orban to face that reality.
Thomas, thank you very much indeed. We're out of time. I'm very sorry, Dennis. I know you wanted to contribute, but we're done. I'm in big trouble because I've overrun. Dennis Kataev, Russian journalist, thank you, sir. Thomas Pellarenko from the Jacques Delors Energy Centre, thank you. Anastasia Shaposhkina of Eastern Circles, thank you. And last but definitely not least, in Kyiv, thank you so much for joining us. Inna Sovsun, member of the Ukrainian Parliament of the Golos Party. Thank you, Inna, for your time, and thank you for your presence in this debate. We really appreciated it. Thank you at home or wherever you are for watching, and stay with us here in France 24. More news to come.